This is Python Tute02A, and we're going to be looking at lists. As I go through this tutorial, I'm going to uncomment what I'm talking about. You need to type these print statements in so that you can actually follow along. So the first thing I'm going to say is Python has a data type called a list. Most programming languages refer to these as arrays. And before you can use a list, you need to define it. So let's define it straight away below here. I'm going to create a list called SumList, and SumList is going to be equal to an open and close square brackets, and that will tell Python that is now a list. Now you add items to your list by using the append method like so. So I'm going to go SumList, and I'm going to go dot append. I'm going to open a bracket. I like to close them off as well. I usually try to anyway. And I'm going to append the number 1, which is an integer. I'm going to start with SumList and dot append. And I'm going to add, this time, a string which says hello. Then I'm going to add or append dot append. This time I'm going to add a number which is going to be 6.5, so it's a float. And you can add all sorts of things here. If you've got pictures that you've inserted or created, you can add them to your list. If you've got an object that you've created in object-oriented programming that has a whole bunch of features, you can add it to your list. So your list can contain any data type that you like. In order to see what's in the list, it's pretty straightforward to use the shell just to print out some list. Let's run that. I need to save it and run it. I'm running this as Tute2. And if I run it down there, you'll see that it's written out all my text, and I've got 1, hello, and 6.5 down the bottom. So that's working for me. And the next thing I'm going to do is that you can access an individual's item in the list by using the index. And an index is just a number, and you do it like so. So I'm going to print, and it's going to be SumList, and open the square brackets, and I'm going to put in the item 0. And if I run that now, you'll see that it pops up, and the last thing it puts down there is 1, which is the first item in the list, which is actually the 0th item in the list. And that's how computer programs often work with their list, is the first item is actually item 0. So if we print out, for example, just to extend this, SumList, and we put in number 2, that's going to give me the last thing in this particular list. So I'm going to run that now, and you'll see that the last thing is 6.5. You can put lists inside lists, and I didn't actually have that there, so let's actually put this comment in, print. You can put lists inside lists, inside lists, inside lists. You can just keep going like that forever. Okay, you can actually put lists inside lists until you've got so many lists, it's not funny. Okay, so let's actually look at that. So I'm going to go SumList, and I'm going to go dot append, and I'm going to add in my bracket in there in square brackets, so you can see that I'm putting a list in there, and I'm going to put 3 comma by comma, and I'm going to put 18.7 as an example. So I'm going to append that to the list, and I'm going to say print SumList, and we'll see what we're doing here. We hit run there, and you can see down the bottom 1, hello, and 6.5 that we already had. Then there's a comma, and then there's open square brackets to show me that there's another list inside there, and we've got 3 by and 18.7. And I can actually look at that list by going print in more detail, SumList, and look at it as 3, that's item 3 in my list. So if I run that, it prints out everything, and you can see that it's actually showing that list. But if I want to access a specific thing in that list, I can go print some list, and I can call this 3. So that's going to look at that list inside the list, and I'm going to look at the item inside the list, and the item I'm going to look at inside the list is item 1. If I run that, you can see now that I've got the whole list. I've drilled into the sub list, and I've now pulled out the item in that sub list just by. And in other programming languages, they would refer to this as a multi-dimensional array. So it's got 2 dimensions. So you can actually think about that. If you're plotting X and Y on the screen all the time, you can think of that as a 2-dimensional array as well. So you can actually start doing things like tile-based games with that. Or if you wanted to put 3 dimensions, you can start playing with a 3-dimensional game. But you can actually have 4 dimensions and 5 dimensions, as many as you need, because you can put lists inside lists inside lists. Now, moving on, there's something in most programming languages called an associative ray. In Python, they actually call it a dictionary, and an associative ray means that you can put meaningful words in place of indexes. So let's actually have a look at what that is actually going to look like. So I'm going to say some list, I'm going to put it into my current list, and I'm going to go .append, and instead of using square brackets, I'm going to use curly braces, and inside those curly braces, I'm going to use a string, and this will be first name, and I'm going to use a colon, and the first name is going to be Bob. And I'm going to use a comma to separate the items in this associative array. The last name is going to be Smith, and put a comma to separate this. This gets a little bit clumsy, and you've got to make sure you close off that thing as well. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put age, and these names are all strings because they're words, but the age is going to be 21. So now, if I go print some list and run that, you see that I've got first name Bob, last name, so that's all stuck in there. But what I can actually do now is I can use those meaningful words to access it. So I can say print some list, and I'm looking at item 4 now, and item 4 is that particular associative array or dictionary, and I'm going to use a last name, making sure I keep the cases the same as that, so it has to be case sensitive, and right, you can see that, press enter there and run that, and you can see the last name is Smith as per normal. But if I actually wanted to do that as well, I could go print some list, and in some programming languages this does work, and in some programming languages this doesn't work. So that is actually the second part of that array. So if I go 1, which is the second part, which is item number 2, and run on that, it gives an error. So Python does not allow you to actually refer to a list by its index number, whereas other programming languages do. So that's an error. Let's actually comment that out. And leads to an error. So that's basically walking through lists. You can also directly overwrite any data in any of those lists by going. So I'm going to choose some list, and I'm going to actually overwrite the last name. So I'm going to go 4, and then I'm going to overwrite the last name. And you can see that last name is an easier way. I need to use that particular one. Last name is an easier thing to do than remember the actual number. And I can set that equal to, and it's now going to be a Jones instead of Smith. And now if I print some list, you'll see that I've got the last name change from Smith to Jones. So as I'm working through, I'm able to do a number of things to this particular list in order to basically manipulate it. But the associative array or the dictionary is a nicer way of actually storing it, because in programming, it makes it easier for me to refer to that. It makes it more maintainable, easier for me to understand what I'm looking at, rather than looking at just numbers, as you would here in this particular array up here. So basically, you can see I'm using the word array because that's what I'm used to. In the next part of this tutorial, which will be in another video, we're going to look at things you can do or functions that you can actually perform on your lists.